All right, ready to dive in. Today, we're looking at something pretty interesting, sustainable shopping habits. You always hear about how Gen Z is like all about saving the planet, but how do their shopping choices actually stack up against, say, Gen X? That's what we're going to find out today.
Should be interesting.
Yeah, we'll be focusing specifically on how these generations approach buying sustainable outdoor apparel online, like jackets and stuff.
Yeah, it's a good question because you have to remember that even though younger generations tend to be more vocal about, environmental concerns, Gen X actually holds more purchasing power right now.
Right, right.
So we'll be digging into a study from Germany that was recently published in Sustainability. They used some really innovative research techniques to get some real insights into what online shoppers are thinking.
Okay, so just so we're all on the same page, we're talking Gen X, born roughly between 1961 and 1976, versus Gen Z, born between 1994, 95, and 2010. Why focus on these two generations in particular?
Well, like I was saying, Gen X is kind of in their peak earning years right now. Makes sense.
They've got the most disposable income, so that makes their choices particularly interesting.
Yeah.
Gen Z, on the other hand, well, they're known for being the most sustainability conscious, but they also often have a much tighter budget.
Yeah, for sure.
So it kind of raises the question, are they really putting their money where their mouth is?
Right. Are they really factoring sustainability into their purchases, or are other things kind of like taking priority? That makes total sense. But before we get to the findings, can we talk a little bit about how this study actually worked? Was it just one of those like rate how much you care about the environment surveys?
Oh, no, not at all.
Okay.
It's way more in-depth than that. The researchers actually used a method called adaptive choice-based conjoint analysis.
Wow.
It's a mouthful, I know.
Yeah.
But it's basically, it's designed to mimic how people shop online, in real life.
Interesting.
So participants were shown different combinations of features for a hypothetical outdoor jacket.
Oh, okay. And they had to choose which one they would actually buy.
Okay.
This lets the researchers get a much clearer picture of what factors are actually influencing purchase decisions, like in a real world scenario.
Gotcha. So what kind of things were they considering when they were choosing their ideal jacket?
Well, before they even jumped into the actual study itself, they did a focus group to really zero in on what mattered most to shoppers.
Okay.
They looked at things like waterproofness, windproofness, durability, and the overall functionality of the jacket.
Makes sense.
Of course, sustainability considerations were in there too. Things like the materials used in production, whether those production practices were ethical, the presence of sustainability labels, and even the country where the jacket was made.
Right.
And of course, they looked at the price and the design because, let's be honest, those things matter too.
Of course. We all want to look good and feel good while saving the planet.
Okay.
Right. So, with all those factors in mind, let's get to the heart of the matter. What did they find out about how Gen X and Gen Z actually view sustainability when they're buying clothes? Was Gen Z really as eco-conscious as everyone says they are?
Well, right off the bat, they found that Gen Z does report being more environmentally and socially conscious than Gen X when it comes to buying clothes. Not exactly a shocker there.
Right.
But here's where it gets interesting, okay? Gen Z was also much more familiar with different sustainability labels, things like Blue Sign, Fair Wear Foundation, Fair Trade, and Okotex.
Okay, that makes sense. They've grown up with this stuff, right?
Right.
Social media, influencers, everyone's always talking about sustainability these days.
Right.
But does that mean they actually, know what it all means? Because I'll be honest, I see those labels sometimes, but I don't always know what they stand for.
Yeah, and that's a really important point. It's something brands need to think about. Because if consumers don't understand what those labels actually represent, how much weight do they really carry, Like, for instance, Blue Sign focuses on minimizing environmental impact throughout the whole textile manufacturing process.
Okay.
But Fair Wear Foundation is more about ensuring fair labor practices and safe working conditions in garment factories.
So one's more about the environmental footprint and the other's about the social impact.
Gotcha.
But did Gen X and Gen Z actually prioritize these labels when they were choosing their jacket? Were they actually swayed by them, or were other factors more important?
Well, for both generations, the top 3 decision drivers were pretty standard. It was price, design, and country of origin.
Yeah, who doesn't want a stylish jacket at a good price?
Exactly. But what was really fascinating is that functionality was a much bigger deal for Gen Z than for Gen X.
Oh, really?
Yeah, features like waterproofness, windproofness, how lightweight the jacket is, whether it packs down easily, these things really matter to them.
So they want a jacket that works well, and aligns with their values. I mean, that makes sense. Gen Z is all about experiences, so they need gear that can actually keep up with their, active lifestyle.
Exactly. It seems like they're not willing to sacrifice functionality for sustainability,
Right.
which is a crucial thing for brands to understand if they're trying to appeal to this generation.
For sure. For sure.
They need to offer products that actually deliver on both fronts.
So they're not going to buy a jacket just because it has a fancy eco label if it's not actually going to work for them, right?
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's get down to brass tacks here. Were they actually willing to pay more for sustainable options? I mean, that's the real question, right?
That's the million-dollar question. And while the study showed that Gen Z was less driven by price than Gen X when it came to those sustainable choices,
Interesting.
it seems like they're actually walking the walk, even though they might have less money to spend. This finding actually lines up with other research that shows that, younger consumers are willing to shell out a bit more for products that align with those ethical values.
Okay, so they're willing to put their money where their mouth is, even if they have a little less of it. What about those social labels we were talking about earlier? Did they actually care about things like fair wages and working conditions?
This might surprise you, but social labels were significantly more important to Gen Z than to Gen X.
Hmm.
Yeah, it seems they really, truly care about the ethical treatment of the people who make their clothes.
Okay, so that's something brands should definitely be paying attention to.
Absolutely.
What else? What else stood out to you about their priorities?
Well, one interesting finding was that both generations actually prioritized the materials used in the jacket over the presence of a general eco label.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so, in other words, they'd rather have a jacket made from inherently sustainable materials like organic cotton or recycled polyester than one that just says it's eco-friendly without specifying the materials.
That makes you wonder if there's some skepticism about those general eco labels. Maybe they've seen too many greenwashing campaigns and they're looking for more tangible proof of sustainability.
Yeah.
Or maybe they just feel better knowing exactly what their clothes are made of.
Right, exactly. It seems like transparency and authenticity are really key here.
Totally.
Just slapping an eco label on something isn't enough anymore. Consumers want to see the specifics.
Transparency is key. Now, I'm curious, were there any surprises within each generation? Like, did all Gen Xers feel the same way about sustainability? Were there any differences, say, based on gender?
Actually, that's a great question. This study did find some interesting variations within each generation. Gen X, for example, was more divided on the issue of sustainability than Gen Z.
Oh, really?
Yeah, some people in that generation were very conscious of, social and environmental factors,
Right.
while others were much more driven by price.
So it's not accurate to just lump all Gen Xers together. Some are embracing the sustainable choices and others are sticking to their budget conscious habits.
Yeah.
What about Gen Z? Were they a more unified front?
Generally, yeah. Gen Z showed greater consistency in their sustainability focus.
Right.
Although there were still some individual differences, of course.
Makes sense. I mean, they've grown up with these concerns being front and center their whole lives.
Exactly.
It's been ingrained in their worldview from a young age. Now, you mentioned earlier that the study looked at different types of sustainability labels. Did any specific labels stand out as being more persuasive than others?
This is where it gets really intriguing. Well, both Gen X and Gen Z really favored that fair trade label.
Okay.
The one that focuses on, fair wages and
Yeah.
creating those sustainable livelihoods for producers.
Right.
It actually beat out labels that just focused on, good working conditions.
Interesting.
And similarly, the OECO text label, which addresses health and safety concerns in textile production, that was preferred over Blue Sign.
Really?
Yeah, which is the one focused on environmental impact.
It makes a lot of sense when you think about it. It's like
Yeah.
they're saying, hey, we care about the whole picture, the environment and the people making the clothes.
Right.
It's not just about ticking a box.
Yeah.
It's about knowing that their purchase is actually making a difference,
Yeah.
Contributing to a better world.
Exactly. It highlights this growing awareness among consumers that sustainability isn't just about, environmental impact.
Right.
It's about social justice. It's about economic fairness. It's about creating a system that works for everyone.
It's about making those responsible choices that have a ripple effect,
Yeah, absolutely.
So given all these insights into how Gen Z and Gen X think, what are the big takeaways here?
Yeah.
What does this all mean for the future of, sustainable apparel?
Well, one thing is crystal clear.
Okay.
Brands cannot afford to ignore Gen Z's commitment to ethical consumption. This generation is willing to put their money where their values are, even if they have less disposable income than older generations.
Yeah, it's not just a trend for them.
Yeah,
It's a way of life.
it really is.
But what about Gen X? They're a little bit more of a mixed bag, right?
Yeah, they're a more complex market segment for sure.
Yeah.
And they're at a point in their lives where they might have more financial resources,
Right.
but they've also got different priorities like family, career,
Yeah, of course.
Some are very conscious of sustainability.
Uh-huh.
Others are more price sensitive.
Yeah.
So brands really need to kind of like tailor their messaging accordingly.
Okay.
Highlighting the value and durability of sustainable products while also appealing for that sense of social responsibility.
So meet them where they are and show them how sustainable choices can work with their lifestyle and values.
Exactly.
Speaking of different values, this study was done in Germany.
Right.
Do you think these findings would hold true in other parts of the world?
It's a great question. I mean, Germany is known for being pretty progressive when it comes to environmental awareness.
Yeah.
I think it'd be fascinating to see how these findings compare to consumer behavior in, say, the US, China, or India,
Right.
places where cultural values and shopping habits can be quite different.
Totally. It makes you wonder how much cultural context really shapes those decisions. I mean, think about it. Some cultures put a huge emphasis on buying local,
Right.
while others are more drawn to, like, those big international brands.
Right.
I mean, all these factors could definitely play a role in how people approach sustainable shopping.
For sure. And then you've got the issue of access and affordability, too.
Yeah.
I mean, in some parts of the world, sustainable options might just be too expensive or even hard to find,
Yeah.
So it all adds these layers of complexity to the whole thing.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that there's not like a one-size-fits-all approach to understanding sustainable consumer behavior, right?
Definitely not.
It's a global puzzle with like tons of pieces.
It really is. And I think as we continue to learn more about how these different generations and cultures approach sustainability,
Yeah.
we can actually start to develop better strategies for promoting, ethical consumption worldwide.
It's pretty exciting to think about the possibilities. This deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about.
Me too. And speaking of thinking about things, I think it's important to remember that this study focused specifically on outdoor apparel.
Okay.
It'd be interesting to see how these findings compare to, say, other product categories.
Yeah.
Like, would we see the same trends in food or electronics or cosmetics,
That's a great point. Consumer behavior can change a lot depending on what they're buying.
Right.
And, this whole conversation makes me think about the bigger picture, too.
Uh-huh.
Like, we've been talking about individual consumer behavior, but what about businesses and governments? What's their role in all of this?
You're right. I mean, while individual choices matter, they
Sure.
can only go so far.
Right.
We need companies to adopt better practices. And we need governments to actually create policies that encourage, responsible production and consumption.
It's a shared responsibility.
It is.
We all have a part to play in creating a more sustainable future.
For sure.
And ultimately, the choices we make as consumers can send a really powerful message.
Absolutely. Consumer demand can drive real change.
Exactly.
So next time you're shopping for, I don't know, a new jacket or anything really,
Yeah.
take a second to think about the impact of that purchase.
Think about the materials, the
Yeah.
manufacturing process, the brand's values.
Yeah.
Your choices matter. But before we get too philosophical here,
Uh-huh.
remember that interesting thing we were going to unpack about those sustainability labels?
Oh, right. Well, it turns out they were way more into labels that focused on, like, the positive impact,
Right.
like fair wages, sustainable livelihoods,
Okay.
rather than just basic labor standards,
Yeah. So it's not enough to know that workers aren't being exploited, right? It's about knowing that their work is actually helping them and their communities.
Exactly.
It's about building a better future.
It really is.
That's a powerful message.
It is. And it shows that people want to connect with the people behind the products.
Yeah.
They want to feel good about what they're buying, knowing that it's not just a good product, but that it's, supporting ethical practices,
Yep.
contributing to a better world.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's like they're saying, hey, we're not just consumers, we're citizens, and we want our purchases to make a difference.
Exactly.
And it's interesting that that preference for positive impact, it was there in both generations.
Yeah, it seems like regardless of age, people are looking for brands that share their values,
Yeah.
brands that are actually trying to make a difference.
And companies need to pay attention to that.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not enough to just like offer a good product at a decent price anymore. People want to know what the brand stands for. what impact they're having, if their practices align with their values.
Exactly. And it goes way beyond just slapping a label on something.
Yeah.
Consumers are smart, They can smell greenwashing a mile away.
Totally.
They want transparency, about the supply chains,
Right.
the labor practices, the environmental impact.
Authenticity is key.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for our listeners out there, whether you're a Gen Zer who's, super passionate about ethical consumption,
Right?
or a Gen Xer trying to make more conscious choices?
Yeah.
Remember, your purchases have power.
That's right. Every time you spend money, you're kind of voting for the kind of world you want.
So do your research, support brands that share your values, ask questions.
Absolutely.
And remember, sustainability isn't just about buying less,
Right.
or just buying from ethical brands.
It's bigger than that.
It's about being aware of the impact of our choices.
Yeah.
Reducing waste, pushing for bigger change.
It's about recognizing that we're all connected and that our choices really do have ripple effects.
They do. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of sustainable shopping, we encourage you to keep learning, keep asking those questions, and keep making those conscious choices.
And I'll leave you with one final thought.
Okay?
Think about the role of technology in all of this.
Oh, yeah.
How can we use technology to make things more sustainable? From how things are made to how we buy them.
That's a great question. Clearly, technology has a huge part to play in the future of sustainable consumption. But for now, we'll leave you with that thought. Thanks for joining us on this journey. And remember, every choice you make can make a difference.
Until next time, stay curious and stay engaged.